All right, man, peace. So now this is going to be part two in regards to my review of the events that transpired at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. In part one, I was just going over some of the content of what occurred and what revolved around Mr. Nicholas Cruz and the correlations that I found between what he committed and how he committed it with some of the other mass shootings, like what was executed by Mr. James Holmes in Aurora, Colorado, as well as Mr. Adam Lanza at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, and some of the components that they shared, like an infatuation with the character of the Joker in the Dark Knight movie series, as well as the character of Arnold Crimp, who was created by Mr. Frank Miller, who wrote the classic graphic novel Dark Knight Returns, which is also a Batman comic book, and certain other components, like the fact that they all claim to hear voices, particularly Mr. Nicholas Cruz, who claimed that he was directed by certain voices and not only what to do, but how to do it on the day of the Parkland murders, which took place on Valentine's Day, aka the Lupercalia. So now we're going to move forward into part two, and we're just going to analyze how they originally reported this event. And I want you guys to pay very close attention to how these anchors are dressed, especially Miss Gail King and one of the guest correspondents by the name of Frances Townsend. Pay very close attention to how they're dressed, and I'm just going to go over a few things. And then we're going to go to one of their psychologists on staff by the name of Lisa DeMoore. But anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Tarika, thanks. And for now, Fran Townsend is with us. She is our CBS News senior national security analyst.
Now look at Fran Townsend's face. Look at how she's dressed, brothers. I've gone over certain dress themes many times on this channel. As you can see, she has on the leopard print. She also has on what appears to be a diamond pendant. I'm not saying that that's actual diamond, but she has on a diamond pendant. And to be quite frank with you, her face looks masculine. And I'm not one of these online tranny experts, but as I have stated, there are many transgenders sprinkled throughout the entertainment industry. They do adhere to the veneration of the transgender because it harkens back to their god, that being the quote-unquote Baphomet. And in his alter ego as the hermaphrodite god, he was known as Attis. He was also known as Hermaphroditus, the son of Hermes and Aphrodite. Hermes was just the Greek name for Cush. Aphrodite was just the so-called goddess of lust. That was her goddess of love altar. Her actual name was Semiramis. So Semiramis was the wife of Cush. They gave birth to Nimrod after Cush was disenfranchised for trying to build the tower in an apostasy against the Most High of the Bible, as can be read in Genesis, the 11th chapter. Then their son Nimrod took over, and Nimrod married his mother Semiramis. And he was venerated for a very long time until he was taken out of power by Shem. And then according to Semiramis, he was reborn as Tammuz, or in the Kemetic culture, Heru. I say all that to say this: they do venerate the bringing together of opposites, and in one sense, that being the male and the female, they bring them together. That's why the hermaphrodite, or the so-called tranny, is worshipped or venerated in this society. But that's a whole other video for another day. I mean, we can do certain components of that, as can be seen in many of the ancient mystery school systems. But just pay attention. She has on leopard print. Why would you wear leopard print to talk about a story like this? Like, leopard print is something that you would think a woman understands sexualizes her, which is why the leopard print is a major trigger that's utilized in the MK Ultra system. It's known as the beta program sex kitten. You'll oftentimes see them with animal print, like zebra stripes, cheetah print, or particularly leopard print is one of their favorites. And you have something called diamond level jewel programming. Like, if you ever study or you read up on the MK Ultra mind control programming, there are certain symbols that you have to look for. It's like the butterfly. You may hear me utilize that term, monarch butterfly, a lot. the reason why they coined the program, the Monarch program, or the Monarch Butterfly program, is because they found that the Monarch Butterfly is able to pass down certain information from one generation to the next without it having to be taught. For example, the Monarch Butterfly migrates from one region to another to give birth. And once it gives birth, of course, the caterpillars, they go into their cocoon and then they become butterflies, and they're able to find the same region where their parents came from without having flown there in a group or having been shown where to go. So obviously it's encoded. So what many of the psychologists who perfected the mind control program, known as MK Ultra, were able to understand just off of studying the Monarch Butterfly is that you can encode certain things genetically in human beings as well that can be passed from one generation to another. And that goes a lot into a lot of what they call the holy bloodlines and so on and so forth. But that's another topic for another day. Point being is that they have different ways where they program their subjects, where they program children, normally starting at about 6 months old to a year old, 2 years old. It starts off with sexual ritual abuse. Oftentimes, babies will get ritualistically raped. They'll get beaten. They'll get put under electroshock therapy. They'll experience food or water deprivation, flashing lights. They'll be beaten until they understand how to associate certain colors with certain personality alters. Like, for example, if the programmer wants the child to associate the color blue with royalty, they'll beat the child until they'll say act blue, and the child will act in a royal way. Or if they want the child to associate the color red with being lustful, they'll beat the child until they'll say act red, and then the child will be lustful towards a certain person or certain subject. This is part of how they train many of what are called the MK assets that are sprinkled throughout the entertainment industry, also are placed into the sports world. So one of the forms of programming is known as jewel programming. And it goes up through different levels. You have I believe it starts at amethyst, is the first jewel. And under the amethyst programming, that's where they learn to understand the importance of secrets. Then they have the ruby programming. Ruby programming is based off of the installation of sex programming. In other words, children are trained on how to sexually gratify adults through ruby programming. Then you have emerald programming, which is closely linked to family loyalty, witchcraft, etc. You'll sometimes see black cats that are associated with that level of programming. I'm trying to remember what the other ones were. Yeah. Emerald programming was witchcraft. And then the highest level is diamond level, which I suspect this person, Frances Townsend, is, especially since she's entrusted with a lot of high-level secrets. Like, for example, Marilyn Monroe was diamond level programmed. Beyonce is diamond level programmed. This woman seems also to be a diamond level programmed MK asset. Just looking at her face, she looks spaced out. And of course, her outfit, she has on the leopard print. So she has different layers of programming. But I also want you guys to pay attention to Gayle King when they show her, because I did a video on one of the episodes of CBS Morning News a while ago. And I know if you guys have been on my channel long enough, you may have remembered Gayle King had on 2 sets of chains, like real chains, not necklaces. I mean, real chains. And I was, joking on her. And I thought that she was just making a fashion statement. But now I realize that the chains were meant as triggers for her to stay under restraint. So just pay attention to what she has on here.
Analyst, she was Homeland Security and Counterterrorism Advisor for President George W. Bush. Welcome, Fran. What are investigators trying to find out from the shooter?
Well, they want to understand both his mental history. We know that there was this report from a video blogger on YouTube back in September identifying Cruz to the FBI. Difficult, when I say identifying, he identified the comment. He was interviewed, the video blogger asked if he knew him. He said no, he didn't know him.
Now, we see Mr. Nicholas Cruz on the ground here. As we already know, the eagle is the symbol for the high school Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. But I believe that it also may have been some form of mind control trigger for him, as we're going to see, hopefully later on in this video, if everything is able to fit within the frame of this video. As I stated at the start of part one, the eagle and the veneration of the eagle, at least in this society, is just meant to be an offshoot of the veneration of the phoenix bird, which is meant to represent Heru, aka Horus, who is the god that is commemorated when ritualistic sacrifices are performed. So I have little doubt that when they did interview Mr. Nicholas Cruz, or when they did interrogate him, I should say, that he was very hazy-minded, because he was a Manchurian Candidate as sleeper agent. And I may go through that film, Manchurian Candidate, starring Denzel Washington, one of the most revelatory films made on the subject of sleeper agents. Very important film.
Now, this was reported to YouTube and they took it down, but it points to a host of issues, John. So, for one, when we think of Homeland Security, we think of terrorism issues, we think of natural disasters.
And let me say this also about this person, Miss Frances Townsend. She's from Long Island. She's from a city in Long Island, or a town in Long Island called Wantagh. Now, Wantagh is relatively close to another town called Montauk, Montauk. And Montauk, Long Island was known, or has become infamous for being the site of a lot of MK Ultra experimentation on children. So was she one of the children that was caught up in the experimentation there? It's possible. You know what's interesting when you read up on this person? She also, of course, has a background in psychology, as you'll find many people who become associated with becoming correspondents on television, speaking up about these mass shootings, because they truly understand what's going on. Many of the higher level psychiatrists and psychologists, especially the ones that you see on TV, they know about the sleeper agents, the Manchurian Candidates, and the triggers that are utilized to control them. But I believe that this person here may also be an asset, just looking at how she's dressed. Some people might say, well, she's dressed like that because it's Valentine's Day. But I mean, one would think, especially since it happened the day before was Valentine's Day, this was aired on the 15th. So there's really no excuse for her to be dressed like this. She's dressed like she's going out on a first date or something like that. One would think that, you would want to cater your attire to the event, the seriousness of the event that you're speaking about. So it's very clear to me that her outfit is meant or is attributed to the mind control programming that she's under. Certain people might think that what I'm saying is a little out there, but the MK Ultra program was made privy to a congressional hearing in 1977. It's very real. Okay, it's not something that's concocted. You just have to, put down the video game controller, put down the blunt, and actually open up a book and read or research. That's all you need to do. But yes, you look up the Montauk boys. You know who's from Montauk also, or from that area, I should say. I'm not going to say that they're from there. The Baldwin brothers. The Baldwin brothers are from that area in Long Island as well. Many of these top-level actors, they're nothing but flesh and blood androids. I tell you brothers that all the time. I tell you people that who come on my channel all the time. A lot of them are nothing but flesh and blood androids.
We don't think of school shootings. And, right now, when you think of this, this is the 18th school shooting this year. Last year, this time we had 7.
Now look at Gail. I don't know if you guys can see it yet. She has on a sweater or a top with chains on it. It's very obvious to me that the chains are meant to be a trigger of restraint for Miss Gail King, who herself is under the programming. It's very obvious to me now that she's been put under twinning programming with her significant other, Oprah Winfrey. Twinning programming, for those of you who don't know, is when two MK subjects are put through the programming together and they develop a bond together. Another example of people who were put under twinning programming was Corey Feldman and Corey Haim. Now notice both Nora O'Donnell and Gail King are wearing black and white, which is to symbolize the coming together, to bring together of opposites. So in other words, the event that transpired, they understand was meant to push forth the Hegelian dialectic, or some of the Machiavellian principles that ends justify the means, or establishing chaos to instill order.
Should we rethink Homeland Security? Because it sure feels like terrorism to me.
Look at this. If you're Gayle King and you wake up on the 15th of February, the day after a mass shooting, you wouldn't say to yourself, maybe I'm not going to wear the top with all the chains on it. And once again, for those of you who've been on my channel long enough, you remember I did a video where I can't remember what the topic was, where Gayle had on 2 huge chains. And I'm like, why is Gayle wearing them big ass chains for? And it was 2 actual chains. They weren't necklaces. There was 2 actual chains. And I made a joke about it. I said, maybe she got it on slavery.com or something like that. I said, something silly. And I'm looking at her outfit here, and I realize now that the chains are meant to act as triggers for restraint. See, Gayle's not fully in the know. She's just, she's a little bit lower level than a Norah O'Donnell or a Charlie Rose, because if you see the video that I did on the RFID implementation, Gayle King was the only one on the panel who said that she would not get the chip. I mean, hell, she might already have it, don't even know it. But Norah O'Donnell and Charlie Rose, they both said, oh, yes, I would take the chip. You know why? Because they already got it. But when I saw her outfit here, when I saw Gayle King's outfit, I said, Gayle's under the programming. They got Gayle already. But I just wasn't sure to what level they had her under that level of control.
Hurts as badly. It's just as terrible. Do we need to rethink what Homeland Security really means?
I think that's exactly right, Gayle. I mean, imagine for a moment if the shooter had been a Muslim. We'd have been having a different kind. That's exactly right. And how wrong does that feel, right? And so this ought to be.
Now notice the correspondent here, Miss Frances Townsend. Now she's trying to take the onus off of Islam and bring it more towards quote unquote domestic terrorism. Really what they're going to try to hone in on are the conservative Caucasians in Middle America who are proud gun owners. They're going to try to bring the heat on them, the scrutiny on them, because that's truly what it's about for them right now. They're trying to figure out a way to socially engineer society so that they can get everyone to look at gun owners as possible or probable terrorists.
Ought to be at the top of the list of Homeland Security threats, because we have an obligation to protect our children. And we need to deal, even though it's a difficult political issue, it's time for people to put that aside and really say we're going to deal with it.
I'm also interested in the assault rifle that he used, an AR-15, which can cost about $2,000. That's a lot for a 19-year-old working at a dollar store.
Ding. Thank you, Norah O'Donnell. Thank you. I think that you already know that he must have had some type of help in acquiring that weapon. There's no way in the world that he acquired that weapon and all the artillery that he was able to get working at no damn dollar store.
But also, the AR-15 has been used in 6 of the deadliest mass shootings in this country. Aurora, Newtown, San Bernardino, Las Vegas, the Pulse shooting in Orlando.
So what did that tell you, Miss Norah O'Donnell? That tells you that all those people were assets. That's what that should tell you. That mass shooting at Sutherland Springs, Texas, I believe that was the church shooting. That person was also former military, right? They're making a lot of these sleeper agents, aka these Manchurian candidates, either at psychiatric centers or behavioral psychology centers or in the military, and they're just sending them out, and they just actionize them whenever they feel like actionizing them. Allegedly, that's what they're doing. Allegedly.
Sutherland Springs. Do we need to have some changes at the ATF and others about who can buy this type of weapon?
Look, Nora, you know better than anybody. There's been these debates in Washington about putting these restrictions. The NRA says that's a slippery slope. You begin down that path. People ought to remember that this was the assault rifle was really intended for military use, right?
Absolutely, but you must also understand that the reason why many citizens of the United States want to have artillery on that level is because they feel like they have to have something that they can use in case the military is used against American citizens. And when I say the military, I don't necessarily mean just the U.S. military. I'm talking about a possible global military that could be brought over here to the United States in case martial law is declared. So that's the point behind that. And a lot of people don't get that. Let me also say this about this person, Frances Townsend. When she was a child, she wrote a letter to the Pope asking for his permission to become an altar boy. So clearly, as a child, she has some type of sexual identity disorder herself, or himself, or whatever this person is, allegedly.
Right? Well, I think of that from my time in government as being a weapon used by the U.S. military overseas. We understand that law enforcement, people in uniform, have an absolute need for it. But this is a debate. Look, we had an assault weapons ban. It expired. And the politicians in Washington don't seem to be willing to continue to have that debate.
Should a 19-year-old who just been kicked out of school be able to buy that gun?
No.
That's the question.
So the one other issue I wanted to raise this morning is the social media companies. Look, in this case, YouTube should take that comment down when it was identified to them.
And just to clarify, that comment, exactly what he said in there is he said, I'm going to be a professional shooter.
Right. And so they took that down, but they need to do more, right? They need to provide resources, people who go hunting on their networks, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, where they find this stuff. They don't just take it down, they take it down and report it to law enforcement so we can try and prevent these things before they happen.
Well, James Holmes and Adam Lanza also made statements that they were going to be professional shooters as well. Clearly, that's part of their predictive programming, or maybe that's just a manifestation of the quote-unquote voices that they're hearing in their heads telling them what they're going to do.
Well, the man who said it said he showed it to the FBI and that he was interviewed, but where did it go from there? Did anybody follow up with this Nicholas Cruz?
Right. Well, we don't know, and you don't know if they actually were able to identify him from, Nicholas Cruz is a common name. Could they identify him? Could they find him and interview him? Did they understand he had other social media accounts that might have triggered even more concern?
Okay. Thank you, Fran.
Thank you.
President.
Yeah, thank you, Fran. Thank you for your support and for your input and for your freaky dress that you have on to talk about a mass shooting. Real classy. But anyway, we're going to pick up with this psychologist because I definitely want to go over what she has to say. Okay, so now this is going to be one of the resident psychologists that CBS has on their programs whenever they speak about issues pertaining to mass shooting, also human behaviors. Someone by the name of Lisa D'Amour. I want you guys to pay very close attention to, once again, how she's dressed, the interspersed black and white on her dress, as well as her necklace. Pay attention to the hexagons on her necklace, showing you that she is a Saturnian. She's understanding of what her role is in bringing about the quote-unquote great work, or as some people may call it, the quote-unquote New World Order. Or, oftentimes I don't like to use those terms like New World Order or Illuminati because they become so pop culturalized that a lot of times it just goes right through people when you use those terms. But pay attention to how she's dressed.
Psychologist and CBS News contributor Lisa D'Amour joins us at the table to discuss.
Do you see her necklace with the hexagons? An allusion to the cube, or what they call Metatron's cube, or the quote-unquote flower of life. Once again, Metatron is talking about Tahuti or Hermes or Khnum, whatever you want to call that person. The cube was also utilized as a mechanism for the quote-unquote trickster god, aka the Joker. Stated that he emerged out of that box, or out of that cube. That's where you get the mythological story of Pandora's box from. In the story of Pandora's box, she opens up the cube or the box, and chaos emerges out of it. Who is chaos? Chaos is Kush, meaning what? His ideologies spread forth across the world. It's really just a metaphorical retelling of what occurred at the building of the Tower of Babel.
Lisa, good morning.
Good morning.
We keep hearing that just because if you suffer from a mental illness, most mentally ill people are not violent people or dangerous. Yet the go-to in all of these cases seems to be they're mentally ill.
That's right. And, overwhelmingly, people who are mentally ill are not dangerous.
According to who? It depends on what you're talking about. Most people who are mentally ill are a potential danger to themselves or someone else, and they need help. It's not demonizing them at all. It's understanding that they need help. Right here in New York, as a matter of fact, just a couple of days ago, a grown man walked up to a 5-year-old boy and punched him as hard as he could in the face. And then there was footage of a man who looked to be about 35 or 40 years old walking the opposite way of a young girl. I can't remember if it was 7:30 in the morning or 7:30 in the evening, but You can see them on surveillance camera walking opposite each other. He's walking one way, she's walking the opposite way, and he grabs her and throws her to the ground and then just keeps walking. These are people who are mentally disturbed, and they need assistance. Because if not, what do? They bring chaos to their own lives or to other people's lives. They need help.
The thing that we know is that in most cases of violence, there are a lot of factors, not mental illness, that bring violence about. Mm-hmm. So we worry that we are stigmatizing the mentally ill unfairly, and that we are not paying attention to factors beyond mental illness.
Well, there are certain other factors that may contribute to someone acting out in a way that may result in some type of mass carnage. But this is why I stated also, one of the main things is, look, certain people might not like this. Males and females should not be going to school together, particularly as adolescents. Maybe you can make the case up until about, third or fourth grade, fifth grade. But when you start getting up into that 10, 11, 12-year-old range, it brings a lot of chaos and it brings a lot of havoc in these schools when a lot of these boys are worried about what the girls are looking at. The girls are worried about what the boys are looking at as opposed to their actual schoolwork. That leads to a lot of demonization. It leads to a lot of ostracizing of certain people who, quote unquote, don't fit in. And I think that a lot of those social pressures will be alleviated when you separate the genders. But we know that they can't do that in this society because the whole agenda is to bring the genders together. That's why Ms. Emma Gonzalez was the president of the Gay and Straight Alliance. That's what she was more concerned with in high school rather than learning.
Do contribute to violence.
Mm-hmm. Factors like
having a history of violence, having access to weaponry, those things that we know are really significant. Mm-hmm.
Now look at her. It looks like she's getting emotionally upset by having to answer some of these questions. Why is that? Because clearly she has an emotional affinity to what her agenda is, that being disarming people and also bringing together a lot of these opposing forces, hence her necklace. Pay very close attention to this person, Miss Lisa DeMoore, and follow her in the future because I'm pretty sure that she will be utilized for some form of social engineering or what they call behavioral psychology.
We've heard a lot about people saying, if you see anything, any of this kinds of behavior, give us some sense, though, about the extent to which, when we all were growing up, there were kids who said things that were out of bounds. They never did anything. Give us a sense of what...
Well, they didn't do anything that you know of. They may have went home and cut themselves or certain things like that.
Of what it's like as an adolescent and what we should be looking for.
Sure. So, our efforts to come up with some perfect personality profile that will, tell us this person will commit violence, those don't work.
Well, not according to the CIA. That tells me that this person is either uninformed or she's being disingenuous. And I would probably state number two. Because the whole field of psychology is based off of personality assessments. As a matter of fact, and I mentioned this person on this channel before, you brothers can look up a person by the name of John Gittinger. He was known as the CIA personality expert. He developed a system of classifying different forms of personalities known as the Personality Assessment System, PAS. He was able to formulate it by giving people what were known back then as Wechsler tests. It was based off of a psychologist from the early 1900s by the name of David Wechsler. So John Gittinger was able to refine the Wechsler test into what's known today as the PAS, the Personality Assessment System. And he was, I believe the criteria was internalizers or externalizers. And basically his philosophy was, or his findings were, that people's personalities were based off of genetic makeup and also the environment in which they were raised, but he deduced that their personality traits could be altered, their behavior could be altered based off of external stimuli and enough pressure from outside forces. And the CIA still uses many of his findings today when trying to establish who they want to use as agents undercover or to cause any type of a coup, maybe in a foreign government, who can be used to bring information out of someone, who can be used for torture, things of that nature. They still utilize his personality assessment system today. So this person here, Lisa DeMoore, is being very disingenuous. Once again, the whole field of psychology is based off of personality assessment and the possible prognostication of what someone will do based off of their personality type.
What we do know always is that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So if somebody has been violent, if they are threatening, if they're saying they want to harm people, we should take that very seriously.
Something we heard from the president yesterday was his belief that there were a lack of mental institutions and facilities to treat some of these people in the country. He cited New York as an example. Are there a lack of mental institutions in this country?
Well, we did away with mental institutions for good reasons.
Most of the mental institutions were used as testing grounds for the MK Ultra program. Mental institutions as well as prisons, children's hospitals, universities, they were ground zero for most of the MK Ultra programming, especially the use of LSD, as was formulated by Mr. Sidney Gottlieb of the CIA. Okay, a lot of electroshock therapy, as was formulated by Mr. I believe Ewan Cameron. I'm sorry, that was his name, from Canada. That's another doctor named Middlebrook Pierce. There's just so much in regards to that MK Ultra stuff, brothers. I might do a series on that in the future, but don't quote me on that, because I'd rather be jumping in my comment. When you going to do this series on such and such? I'll do it when I get to it, brothers.
There's certainly a lack of adequate services. There are a lot of gaps in our system, and we need to fill those and bring back, services that really can catch people in a social safety net. But you cannot ethically or practically detain large numbers of people because you think they might be violent.
So what are the steps, though? I mean, he mentioned that
You can't detain a whole bunch of people because you think that they might be violent. So in other words, what? You should just let them roam the streets until they actually perform acts of violence, even though you know that they're not mentally stable. That's what you're saying. Sounds like you're an agent of chaos.
This Nicholas Cruz didn't have any criminal past. There were sort of nowhere to put him, nothing to do with him. What are the steps in a situation like that?
The steps she's already laying out is to disarm people. That's basically what she's saying. That's why she does not want to demonize the asset, because she knows who Nicholas Cruz actually is. She knows that he's an asset. Okay, that's why she's trying to lean towards the gun control aspect, because they need to utilize their sleeper agents to bring about their agenda. But I'm going to continue this on part 3. Peace.